My name is Dr. Anne Toth. I'm a clinical social worker, and I have been working in the field of social work and families for about 36 years. In this particular situation, I am not working as a therapist doing individual marital family counseling, but this project asked me to do something different. It asked me to consider how families best communicate with each other and how we can help children who have severe difficulties in terms of their own disabilities and their ability to communicate, how we can help them overcome that. In this study, we looked at how we could help children bridge communication using sign language. Now, this was not an unusual thing to use sign language to communicate, and if you think about a deaf child, teaching them sign language, it's quite common. But our project was not to just teach children who are deaf how to communicate using sign language. It was to teach children who had other communication difficulties brought on by other things such as autism, Down syndrome, fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and learning disabilities. We were interested in those children who were hearing audiologically, but who were not communicating verbally. And because we knew from research that visual and spatial manifestations of communication were important for these particular groups, we believe that using sign language in this novel way could be helpful, could be effective. And we found that for the most part, children did respond to sign language. There were some children who, of course, because of the disability, they weren't able to focus very well. And some children, we spent a whole 6 months working with a child just to get them to respond to a visual contact, making eye contact, instead of rolling on the floor, crying, being disruptive, not being able to focus, to actually make eye contact and acknowledge something. One child who had autism was in the preschool program, still very young, but nevertheless was trying to be integrated into a daycare program. And his mother would faithfully bring him every day, and he would come in and he would be sort of unpacked, and he would be on the floor, and he would roll, and he would moan, and he would, eventually connect with some of the children, and maybe sit and have a snack, and maybe do some kind of an activity. But he wasn't able to communicate, and he didn't certainly seem to be able to respond to anybody who was talking with him. It was very difficult to make eye contact. But we continued to use sign language, and we made him, with all the other children in his little group, we practiced our morning ritual of saying hello. And in his group, it was a French group, so we said bonjour. And so we practiced, and eventually, after 6 months, one of the remarkable things that we weren't really expecting, because we had tried and tried and tried, but at the end of that period, one morning, we again tried to make the eye contact and say bonjour, and he said bonjour back. And he made the eye contact with his mother, which was quite amazing, because his mother had been trying all this time. She would come and she'd sit in the group and she would participate, but there wasn't much response. She did her best, but he wasn't apparently picking up the signs. But when he did that, she was into tears, because he hadn't done that before. When he said with this sign, that meant such a great deal to her. It was the humanness in it. And that's something that I think we forget about when we have children who are disabled, as this little one was. Sometimes parents don't talk much about this, but for them it's a great shame and a great worry for them, and they're just as much disabled as the child, because they can't communicate with their child in the way they would like to. This brought the humanness to her child, to be able to say, take this sign, bonjour. It made such a difference to her. She was to tears. So we had that child. We also had children who were more able, and they were able to, one child I'm thinking of, a child who had Down syndrome, who was able to regain her place in the family by the fact that She was not just the child who was disabled any longer. She was well cared for in her family, but she had lost her position as the eldest because she wasn't speaking. She could hear well enough, but she wasn't speaking. When we used the DVD, it was put in the living room. Everybody sat around, her little sister and herself and her mom and her dad and her grandmother, and they practiced signs with her. They went through each of the categories. We had categories that were common. The hello, goodbye, thank you, please. We had clothing. We had food. Activities that she might do through the day, maybe riding a bicycle, or maybe she would be going to school. But we would use common terms and activities and words that would be in her life, and she learned them. She practiced them with her family. Everybody signed. She began to take ownership of the signs. And as the months went by, she not only learned them, she started to excel in them, and she started to speak. So the hope that we had that not only would we have communication through sign language, but that maybe the children would also learn how to speak since they had the potential physiologically to speak. That would happen, did. That was one of the most remarkable things. She was able to learn to speak. She was able to teach her younger sibling the signs, and she was able to practice speech with her family. She was, at the end, speaking those signs. She was even anticipating when they would come up on the DVD screen what it was. If it was an apple, she would say apple, and she would sign apple. And there she was, speaking. She gained her place back as the eldest child. And she was now the big sister, and she was the daughter that her parents could be very proud of for having accomplished such a wonderful thing. When you have a means to communicate, it makes all the difference in the world. We don't know. We search for a way to have a meaningful relationship with those who care for us. From the moment that we're born and we are cared for by somebody, we are looking for a meaningful way to communicate. We know that if we make a noise, if we make a movement, will somebody pay attention to us? We're looking for that because that's going to tell us, are we okay? Can we trust those who care for us, that they will love us, take care of us when we have a need? Or will we just be left? We know that children who aren't cared for, who aren't held, touched, talked to, cared for, tended to, die. So it's important that we make every effort we can. We know that even children who are the most disabled can respond to this, that they need it. Whatever you can do to make a connection to your child is worth it. It's absolutely essential. The most important relationship a child's going to have is with his or her parent. And we need to do whatever we can to foster that relationship. So using sign language, if that's the means that will connect with the child, that will make it something fun to do, to connect, we encourage it. I know that many parents said to us, oh, we don't want to do that. It's going to make our child stand out. You know, our child's hearing, he's not disabled in that way. We don't want to draw any more attention to him than his other behavior already brings to him. And besides, we don't know how to sign. You know, we can't make those signs. We're going to look silly out there. We just said, look, you know, we're going to do this with you. We're going to teach you some signs, just some basic things. Let's practice it at home. You know, you can start with some food, you know, with an apple, you know, or how about some milk? You want some more? You can say thank you, and you can say please. You can just add some vocabulary, just little words you can add into your experience at home. That'll give you some confidence. You can practice. We'll let you practice at home. We also included deaf people who volunteered their time. We had some groups who were deaf teachers with deaf children, but we also had deaf adults who were willing to be in the community, helping parents learn sign language so they wouldn't feel so awkward. But we did run into that question, and we had to face it head on. You know, yes, we understand. This is a language that up to now has been considered a disability language. It was something that identified you as having a disability. But anybody can use this language. It's a language that's open for anyone to use. It's as wonderful as English and French and German and Spanish and any other language. It's a full language that's available for anyone to use. And if this is the one that helps your child communicate with you, then let's get busy and learn how to use it. The research is there. The ability to use sign language to facilitate communication for hearing children as well as deaf children is definitely there. And we know that if we apply the technology, such as video, that we have available to us in much greater ease than we ever have, and we use the visual, tactile things, even the actual things in families that we have, a real apple, a real banana, the real hat and coat and gloves that we put on, all of those natural things that are out there in our environment can be adapted to teaching through sign language. We can bridge communication for children who have disabilities very easily. It's not beyond our grasp. And I really believe that we must do everything we can to reach out to parents, to support them, encourage them, and surround a child with everyone who's in their environment. Their teachers, their friends, their classmates, their parents, their grandparents, their whole circle of contacts need to have this opportunity to find a way to communicate effectively. There is definitely hope. From the little stories that I've told you today, there certainly is hope, even for children who are most severely disabled and who otherwise would not have communicated. It's hope for the child, but hope for the parents as well. As I mentioned before, when a child has a disability, the parents are also disabled. And they're disabled from what they would normally have thought is the path that they would take to parent, to be the people who would care for their child, to raise their child, to see their child grow and develop and be normal in their lives. There's a way of looking at this that can change dramatically when you give a person language. You don't see the child so much for their disability, but for their ability. They are able to communicate. And when we're able to make that connection, we're not so disabled, and neither is our child. It takes every one of us to listen and to imagine that there's something else that we can do. Not to give up. Don't give up. There's always something else we can do. It's the goal is to communicate. It's absolutely essential to be able to connect with your child, and for your child to be able to connect with you, for their mental health, for their self-esteem, for their growth and development. Just because there happens to be a disability does not mean that there isn't a real person inside who's needing to grow and develop and be a full member of your family and your life. So hats off to Ali and her husband for the work that they do, and for all those others who are working in this field. It's difficult work. It's sometimes hard to convince others that it's worthwhile doing, but the benefits are immeasurable, and I'm just proud to be a little part of it.